I probably took like maybe 15, 20 shots of that until I actually got it to where I felt like it was perfect. And that was the shot that I ended up choosing.
Oh, now I can see why the Eagles pissed me. It took like 20 shots, flashing them right in the face. I
Yes.
can see
No,
why.
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Just Shoot and Learn podcast. I'm your host Johnny with Sebastian and Lewis here. What's up,
What's
guys?
up, guys?
How you doing? How you doing?
We're back. We're
I'm doing
back.
great. I'm doing fantastic.
All right,
Happy
so
to hear
what do you
the
guys do this
last
past week?
episode.
Happy
What?
July. Happy July.
Woo! Happy July. July is here. That's right.
So what did you guys do this past week?
Wait for this
Unfortunately,
podcast.
I saw we recorded the podcast and we discussed these matters. And Johnny came to the house. He helped me start setting up for cataloging my film work that I lost a long time ago when I lost a bag with my hard drives and the backup of the hard drives all together in one day.
Well,
Um,
hey, at least we figured it out. I mean, how's that method working for you with the whole using your table and light table and stuff?
that's a lot better than trying to do the other way that we were trying to do. It's a lot faster because I wanted the camera like or the phone,
More
whatever,
stationary, yeah.
to be stationary so I can just hit it. So it's a lot
So
easier.
that being said, do you still need it, or can I pick it up on July 4th? Granted, by the time this video show airs, so past July 4th. But
Probably you can pick it up on July 4th, this Friday. Yeah, yeah. I'm probably gonna be done. I've been working on it.
well, you were able to burn through that much.
Yeah, I'm actually using it as a light right now.
All right, well, I'm glad to see some
It's a
use. I've
light
had the thing in my
box.
garage forever. I never use it, so.
Luis, what's up with you? Why so serious?
Nothing much, man. I'm just getting ready to meet you guys in New York. So I'm getting all my stuff ready, just packing up, making sure I bring my Rolly. And
I
We'll
see
talk
you
more about that
have.
later. We'll talk more about that later.
yeah, we're gonna talk about that. Actually,
Really excited about it.
we didn't put Sebastian on that
What?
conversation me and Johnny and I had about 30 minutes ago. But yeah, we're gonna talk about some projects as well, and projects that might make us uncomfortable.
You are expected to be here Thursday morning, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Thursday morning, we're gonna go have breakfast in New Jersey. And yeah, we're just gonna get going
Breakfast,
because
sure, Jersey. Thought it was breakfast at Tiffany's.
at
Ah,
Tiffany's at
Well,
you know,
breakfast at Bonanza's. So shout out to Bonanza.
Bonanza,
I
Bonanza.
don't think we'll ever get anybody from there to watch
Are
it,
we
but
getting paid
yeah,
from Bonanza's to get this?
we're not getting paid, but Bonanza,
it's a good
Colombian
spot.
Bakery. You
Got good
can't
stuff
you
there.
can't you can't go wrong with a Colombian bakery anywhere in the New York City area,
For that,
including
man.
New Jersey.
So
So
with that
that's
being said, yeah, by the time this episode airs, you would have probably already been here at least a week, if I'm not mistaken. Because
yeah, this is
yeah,
gonna be a
it is
weird
airing
episode.
after July 4th. Yeah.
This is going to be a weird episode since it will air after I'm already in New York and
Nothing
after
weird
the
about
4th
that.
of July. But yeah, we're going to talk about something that's like kind of like dear to my heart, which is travel photography in this episode. And
Well,
yeah,
in light of you traveling, I guess that would be a appropriate topic since you are traveling to us. So,
Yep.
so that being
yeah.
said, for travel photography, what got you guys to catch this bug to want to travel and do photography?
Who wants
Did
to
it
start?
start before? Did it start before 2012 for the Chile trip that we met each other? That's where I got the bug after I traveled or after I committed myself to go through that program, got accepted. That really got me to actually want to start traveling more. So, what about you guys? Did you actually have the bug prior, or was that I guess you could say the thing that's kicked off this travel bug for you guys?
Sebastian,
Anyone?
Luis, this is all.
Someone?
it's all me.
What? I gotta find out about
It's
you
all
too,
me.
Sebastian.
I'm gonna get inspired by what you're saying, and then I'm gonna say something. But
Yeah.
I just realized before you say that somebody played a really bad trick on me at the coffee shop. I was gonna grab this and have, but it says something right here. So
What does it say?
I don't know,
Great.
but yeah, I don't know. Whatever they put in.
Somebody's in love with you. I think that's what it says. The one of the trips that kind of kickstarted my whole journey with travel and photography. But I had gone I had gone on a trip to Europe 2 years before the Chile trip, and that's when I kind of realized that it was definitely something I wanted to do. And I can't remember. Yeah, 2010. I was already in school, so I was already, studying photography. So that was kind of actually I did have my seven. Yeah, I had my 7D. I had my Canon 7D when I went on that trip to Europe, and yeah, just kind of went around the France, Italy, Spain, and that's when I came back, and I came back with some nice photos from that trip. And once I realized that I was always afraid of traveling by myself before that trip because I had never done it. I had gone to like Colombia, but I had never done it by myself. So after that trip is when I realized that there was something I could do on my own if I needed to. And after the Chile trip, that was definitely definitely the point where I just said, this is what I want to do. I want to continue traveling. I want to continue to document my travels. And that was, yeah, the Chile was like the icing on the cake. It was just that trip that basically made me just make it a passion, make something that I really wanted to do from then on. And to this day, that's something that I still do and I still love.
So just to elaborate more on your Euro trip, do you remember what gear you had? You said 7D, but what else were you packing at the time?
It wasn't crazy. I went on that trip in 2010. I started LaGuardia in 2009, so maybe about 6 months after I started LaGuardia, and I think I was in beginning photography with Terry. So I was just kind of learning a little bit. So I wasn't into like the portraits and the flash photography. I wasn't into that at all at that time because I had just started. But I didn't have that much gear. I had the Canon 7D, and I can't remember. I had a zoom lens. It was a Tokina.
Was it the 11 to 16 by chance, the wide angle, the 2.8, if I remember correctly, possibly, or was it something else?
Yes. Yes, I had the 11 to 16, which was what, like a 16 to 35 on an APS-C,
Essentially, yeah. Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I had the Tokina. I don't know if I had any other lens. That may have been the only lens, and that shows you how much I knew about, you know,
So were you shooting
you
on
know.
manual mode, or were you actually shooting with the green square or green rectangle or the program mode? I mean, do you remember what settings you were using since you were so new into it?
No, that's a good question. I want to say no. I was shooting on manual. I was shooting on manual because I had already taken beginning photography by that time.
Gotcha.
So it was like the summer of 2010, and I started LaGuardia in 2000, September of 2009. So yeah, so I was shooting on manual. I got some cool shots. Like I went to like Venice and Barcelona, which is a beautiful city. Um, in France, I was like in Paris, but um, I didn't get anything like cool. I just remember like the best shots that I took was from like um, my trip to Venice because it's just a very ancient city, and like it's just with the water and like everything else that goes on there, and the sun, like just the sun coming down at the end of the day is you. It was definitely a place for like some nice street photography and stuff like that.
So obviously, like you said, at this time you weren't actually into portraits just yet. So what kind of mindset you had when you went over to Europe doing this entire trip? Was it just to document it like a tourist, or just to document your own experiences, or did you actually have a particular goal or I guess you could say project in mind when you went there?
No, I didn't have a project in mind. I think that I was still fresh. I didn't have that mindset that I had um, during the Chile trip. The Chile trip was definitely the trip that just kind of like, I said to myself, not only do I want to travel, but I want to document, and I'm definitely going to be shooting portraits, and I wanted to like document, but also like have specific projects in mind, and just kind of like take the photos that I was going to take, just take them a little bit more seriously and think about them before I actually shot them. So definitely, so during the Europe trip, it wasn't like that. It was just kind of documenting the travel. It wasn't so much. I wasn't in that mindset that was after the Chile trip. So it was kind of the beginning, but it wasn't. I wasn't like planning any specific projects while I was shooting. It was just kind of documenting the trip.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right, Sebastian, what about you?
Woo!
Did you travel before Chile, or was Chile the trip that
I
kickstarted your
well,
passion for travel?
for me, after the trip to Chile, I took another trip with somebody from LaGuardia, which was Lydia, a fantastic, friend, and we had a great time photograph. We traveled all over Ecuador, so we rented a car. We went to some friends met us along the way, but we really traveled all the four areas, like the coast, the high mountains, the Amazon, and just the entire Ecuador that you can just travel. I don't know. We needed a week just to travel everything, and it was
Well, I was
fantastic.
going to ask, how long was your trip?
But it was there like 8 days. I think we went there for like
Wow.
eight days. No more than that. 10 days, something like
So
that.
how long was the
More than a
travel
week.
from region to region? Were you taking a bus, I presume, instead of flying,
No,
or
no, no. We rented a car. So
Oh,
I knew a friend who was renting a car, like was renting the car. It was cheaper than just renting at a regular place. And we just drove all over Ecuador. We stayed at certain places. We either rented a place or stayed at a friend's place. But it was pretty cool. But for me, it hasn't been a lot of travel photography. I will say that it's more like street photography. Well, that's how I see it. But it really started. I would say back in 2010, right? So I just started remembering now that I'm doing this thing. I was remembering about the camera that I had. It was a digital camera, Olympus something. Um, and so that camera, I had it with my friend, my roommate, or like my neighbor upstairs, and I was carrying it around, and I started just taking pictures and portraits of people, but I wasn't really thinking about photography as my medium. At the time, I was just photographing, documenting, what I was seeing, and that's what I go about. Like for example, when I travel, I was able to travel to Chile and Ecuador. I did a lot of 4x5s, and now that I was cataloging with Johnny, I realized there was a lot of medium format photography, and 4x5s that they were like very candid shots that I did.
that being said, when you were in Ecuador, were you traveling with a 4x5 as well at the time, or no?
Yes. I also did portraits of people, and it was like that. I will set up somewhere. I will figure out the distance with the camera, and I wasn't like setting up too much. It was just like I just wanted to take a portrait of a person, and well, when I did that, I was already at LaGuardia, and I had already done this work of the workers of park in the back. So anyway, that's cool. Like whatever, it is what it is. So um, what interested me was that first, documentary photography, or I was just taking pictures and documenting, and from 2010 and on, I was just taking pictures. I was interested also because yes, I was dating somebody that was very interested in, about photography. So we used to have long conversations on this, which again, based on, or like from the story from last, the second episode, I took history of photography class. After history of photography class, I was very interested in photography. Then I took interested, but like when I took, the first class with Terry, definitely that's when I hit. But I was photographing people, but I was more interested in the people themselves, the story behind the image. So why is that? When I did that, I did the work. I was working at a sheet metal shop, and I had the opportunity to photograph, not just to photograph the people, but to actually, like, since I was working there, I throughout the years, I got to know them. So I knew they had a story to tell. They were all sheet metal workers, but there was like the variety of of how do you say um
Personalities.
yeah, personalities, or how do you say when you have a show and you have uh, anyway, so you have a bunch of personality, but it's just like characters, okay, a bunch of characters, right, that have, it's not just a personality, it's just a character. So then I started to learn about them and get behind what they were doing. So I was going to photograph what they were working on, either welding, cutting, shearing, bending, cleaning, painting, anything within the sheet metal shop that I was working on. And then I realized one of the guys was a retired, professor. Another guy was a singer that was only there, temporarily, and he was just looking for, to get gigs, but he was working as the cleaning guy. And then he's like, yeah, I was like, I was like the one of the guys on the band for this famous Spanish singer Tego Calderon and stuff like that, right? People like that. And I was like, what, really? And then I started, what did you used to do? Oh, I used to do this. So I did this book at school, and that started, to get me really more interested in just taking candid pictures and then just getting to know the person. I think that after that, it evolved into the Naked Project, right? Um, it evolved into like all these nudes, because then there was always the story that there was a connection between me and the subject. At 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 the beginning, the very beginning, it was a close connection. Then later on, it was more open to like the people that I was meeting. But then I will travel with the 4x5 and set it up like I was saying, and then just like shoot people, ask a little bit of a couple of questions. Coincidentally, there's the Humans of New York book, right, that comes out, that started also in 2010, right? And yeah, I mean, it's that's he really. I started to see what he was doing. He was like photographing pictures, people, and shooting it. And he was great because he was at the same time that we started to use Instagram. So it was a square format. It was very intimate to me. It was very intimate. The pictures that he was taking, and then you had the story behind it underneath on the Instagram. The very beginning of Instagram, that it was just pictures. And I was like, wow, fantastic. You can mix and match. Now you can use all these things. Anyway, so I probably went on onto different topics. But yeah, I mean,
Well,
I
I
did
mean, not
travel.
necessarily
I
at
haven't
all.
done a lot of travel photography. I focus more on, like, to me, I'm not from original from here, so I'm still traveling every time I go around.
Yeah,
I'm
that's fair. Everything is travel
taking
photography.
pictures,
I mean, again,
documenting. I don't stop.
travel photography, like I guess you could say street photography, is a very broad subject. So, travel photography just entails, the individual going to said location, but then, the style of shooting is all up to the individual or the photographer. So again, I would say, what you're doing will still, in my books, consider travel photography because you're traveling to locations that you normally wouldn't go to, but this is your way of documenting your experience there to other people. So that does make sense. I mean, I still find that to be travel photography. I mean, if you look at it from that broad spectrum, right? So
What do you think, Luis?
I agree. I mean,
Right.
you can live in Queens and travel to Brooklyn, and document Brooklyn. I mean, that's you're
That brings me to a great memory of a coworker that he was a really, close friend. I will consider that at one point. And he told me that he's never traveled outside. Like, he barely went to the city. He was in Queens most of his time, and he never traveled outside of New York City ever.
that's pretty crazy.
most New Yorkers don't. I mean, a lot of people traveling from from I guess you could say one borough to another. It's almost like going to different cities or different country even. So So it's
Yeah.
understandable. I mean, as you know, New Yorkers, as we all are, or once were once upon a time, well, Sebastian, you still are.
One,
I
hey,
mean,
I'm still a New Yorker. It doesn't matter where I live.
you're
I'm
in
a New
Vegas, man. You
Yorker.
don't even count, man. You're all the way out in Vegas.
I'm a
You know,
New Yorker until
you're
the day I'm no longer here.
dude, you're not even the same time zone as New York, right? So let's not even go there.
Stop it. Stop it.
But again, I mean, yeah, New Yorkers, you know, we all tend to have a kind of weird, you know, I guess you could say mentality about it. You know, where you are, your borough is your home. That's your country, you know. And then when you head
Well,
out to somewhere else, it's kind of traveling. Yeah, I get that. I mean, I
you're in
agree.
Jersey now. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just
Well, I said once upon a time, you know, I never said I'm in New York right now. So yeah,
So
I mean, as for me, to answer the question about travel photography, I think the Chile trip definitely kickstarted. That was Pandora's box for me because I personally, like you said, Lewis, I never thought I had it in me to do something like that. Because when we went back in 2012, we were all strangers. You know, the only one person I might have known besides Scott, who was leading the trip, was Corinne because I took a class with her, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, I didn't know you guys then, especially you, Lewis. You weren't even technically part of the program anymore. You graduated, so you don't even count technically. So,
that was
and
your
Sebastian
that
I never met until then.
your
So
that was your traveling wife at the time.
yeah, I'm not sure my wife would be too happy hearing about that.
That's what
But in
I
any
mean.
case,
It's
yeah, I mean, it was definitely an interesting experience. Yeah, I mean, we all took care of each other, and she was the youngest one there, and I was also the second youngest one there. So I guess it kind of made sense for looking out for each other. But for me, I did not know that was even possible. You know, for me to actually travel with a group of strangers. I mean, it was interesting for sure. It was it was eye opening. I still remember the process to get accepted into the program. You need what is it, three recommendations from three different teachers. And funny enough, I actually got a recommendation from oh no, it was one from a teacher, one from someone who knows you, and one from somebody else, a friend or something like that, or a family member. I don't remember the exact process. I guess we can ask Scott one of these days. But it's funny enough, I asked for my English teacher's recommendation, and despite me cutting his class and him knowing I was cutting his class, he still gave me the recommendation, which was kind of funny. So that was interesting. So after going through all those, I guess you could say hoops and hurdles, I was able to join the program, and that was definitely an eye opener. And at that time, being what was I, 20 at the time, I think, or no, it's 21, I think, yeah. Never been outside the country besides Canada every summer to visit family, so that was definitely unique going to a country that I did not speak the language. I needed a guide. I'd be completely lost, or I'd be worried I'd be completely lost without anyone there to lead us. Um, it was definitely eye opening, you know, and also to be able to bring all the gear and have a trip strictly focused on photography only. I mean, granted, back then, whenever I traveled to Canada, it will always be with a camera because for me, if I was traveling, I had to have a camera. It just wasn't even a question. Even right now, with the kid going out, sometimes I try to always bring a camera with me, despite the iPhone doing most of the work, you know. But still, I still have a camera just in case there's something I can shoot with the camera. But yeah, and that's the thing. I guess ever since I was young, it was ingrained to me that anywhere you go, you have to have that camera. Without it, I just feel, I guess you could say, lost or you're missing something. Like you forgot your wallet or something like that. It's almost like that, you know, because it's such, I guess, a core part of me. Even though I don't really shoot, I'll just bring it with me just to have, just in case. But but yeah, so I got to say that actually, I think, really opened up Pandora's box. And then shortly after that trip, that's when I started working at B&H. And then Lewis, you came on board later. And you know, thanks to the Jewish holidays, we always had a guaranteed 1.5 weeks off twice a year. So I think that's when we actually started, you know, doing our traveling a bit more. I know. I think the first time I may have gone to, oh yeah, the first trip ever after Chile by myself was to South Africa to Cape Town. And
I remember
yeah,
that.
and
I remember
yeah,
that.
yeah. I don't know where you went. Did you go to India at the time, or where'd you go?
Well, the first trip I did after Chile, I actually I was talking last episode about taking a view camera to Colombia. That was actually the trip. I was in
Oh,
2012,
nice.
and I think I went a few months after we came back from the Chile trip, and that was definitely the first trip. I took the view camera. I had a plan in mind, and that's I was just kind of photographing local people around the towns that I was going through, right outside of Bogota. So that was my first actual trip, by myself and just kind of like focusing on a specific project at that time.
Nice. Yeah, for me, as you would make fun of me, what I did over there, like what I do here, is what you call storefronts and street corners. Because unlike you, where you put emphasis on the people, I feel like I put more emphasis on what we've created more than the other individuals. In any case, so I remember that trip. Just like what I mentioned in the previous episode, I had a Canon mirrorless at the time, so I actually brought. I remember quite a bit of gear on that trip. Also, I think I had my 1V for sure with the 24-70-2.8, the first gen. They called it the brick. I had my 100-400. I definitely brought a tripod. I used the Gitzo 1228 that I use for just about everything, and also the Arca Swiss Z1 ball head. Um, I had the EOS M with, I think it was a 22 millimeter f, either 2 or 2.8 lens. I brought my Rolly 35. I remember that very clearly, just because I almost had it pickpocketed from me, or some kid tried to snatch it off my belt at the time. So I do remember that. And I don't remember what other camera I might have brought with me, because this was before the A7 era, where they had all the full frame stuff. So yeah, I think that was the best that I was willing to go with as far as mirrorless is concerned.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, but didn't you do some underwater stuff with like sharks and stuff, or no?
Well, I didn't do any underwater stuff. I went shark diving, and our definition of shark diving for that trip is you're on the side of the boat and you're in a wetsuit, and as soon as a shark is coming by, then they say, "Oh, shark coming by," and you just dump your head underneath the water to look, and then come back up. So it wasn't like what you see, with those real divers in the cage in the middle of nowhere. So I did do that. It wasn't underwater photography. That was just from on the boat. Unfortunately, I didn't have any underwater gear at the time. And it'll be a little hectic to actually try to shoot underwater since I have zero experience, and I'm literally right where the waves are crashing. So that'd be challenging. But yeah, that was overall a fun trip.
What year was that? Was that 2013, 2014? I want to say it was 2014.
Possibly. I gotta check. I don't remember. I know it might have been. And it's funny how I came to choose South Africa was at B&H. We get all sorts of clientele. And I distinctly remember, a lot of pilots and also people from South Africa, they speak English. So I'm thinking, yeah, if I'm going to travel anywhere, I might want to choose a country where I can understand them, they can understand me. So that's how I came to South Africa. I was thinking about England at first, but I was thinking, well, our US dollars, like at that time, if I remember correctly, was I think $1 to half of a euro, half of a pound. So I was like, yeah, I can't afford that. So that's out of the question. But I think that's how I came to South Africa. So.
Yeah, it's very expensive. Like if you go, especially at that time, because I went to London, and if you go to London and you start doing conversion rates,
yeah,
you're not going to be happy, because I remember taking the tube there, which is like their subway, and it was like a $7 ride if you compared it to US dollars. It was just
that's why I cannot afford to go to Europe. I mean, I'd love to go. I mean, to places that use a euro, not necessarily sterling pound. That's just too much. And I remember my cousin asked me after I came back. He says, "Why the hell did you choose South Africa, of all places?" And I was like, "Well, why not? They spoke English." And he's like, "Well, did you know how dangerous it is?" And I had no idea at the time. I was like, I think number 2 for the world's number 2 for murder rates or something like that. I forgot what it was, but something stupid up there.
You were in Cape Town.
I was in Cape Town. Yeah, I wasn't in Johannesburg, which I think was even more dangerous from what I was told. But yeah, I was in Cape Town.
And I'm sorry to cut you off. You didn't do any safaris? Did they have safaris in Cape Town, or?
No. Well, I'm sure they did, but I think you have to book it and then you go further into the center of the country to do it. I think because where Cape Town is what they're really known for, I believe, is shark diving. At least they do a lot of shark diving tours. So granted, I mean, the shark diving does not take place in Cape Town. You book the tours in Cape Town. They take you out to, I guess you could say, the Great White Capital, which is Gons Bay, which is I think about 45 minutes to an hour outside of Cape Town. So I did that, and I remember when I was looking to try to book one of these tours, I met this Jewish fellow who actually lived there. And I was telling him, yeah, I'm from the U.S. I came down here. I heard about shark diving. I'd like to do that. And he said, well, for nothing else in this world, for you to come here to meet me, this would be the reason why, because I've done many, many shark dives. Let me go help you get a deal somewhere. And yeah, we went into town, and he was actually able to help me negotiate, because I think the standard rate for the tour at the time was equivalent to $200. He talked it down to $100 because there's so many competitors competing to get my business, all down the strip. Yeah, so it's $100, free pickup from the hotel, breakfast and lunch included, and drop off back to the hotel. So I mean, that was an awesome $100, probably the best $100 I spent, I think. But yeah, that was definitely interesting for sure.
Nice. Yeah, I definitely want to. I can't remember too many of your photographs, but definitely.
I'll see if I can dig anything up. I think at that time I was practicing panorama, stitching it in Photoshop, which, as you guys know, I hate Photoshop now because I don't know my way around a computer. But yeah, I may have some on my phone where I stitch some shots together. Where you
You
got cable
shot
mounted in the back and stuff.
was it mostly digital? Did you shoot any film while you were there?
I did shoot quite a well, I think more film than digital. I have to dig it up. At that time, I definitely shot some slides. I remember. I got to dig it up because I remember some of my shark shots. You can barely see, just a fin and that's it. And that was all done on slides. And this was during the time when I actually still had my slides mounted because now I don't. I just get them developed and leave them in strips. But yeah, I'll see if I can dig it up and I guess I'll scan some or digitize some. I shouldn't say scan because I don't like use my scanner. So I'll digitize some and see what I can find. But yeah, I remember that was one of my first trips ever out on my own, traveling the world. And of all places, I went to South Africa, Cape Town. So
Yeah, for me, definitely the trip that kind of I know I said definitely Chile, but Chile was a group trip. I went to Colombia. I went to Colombia with the View camera, which was definitely one of my first projects, and I had something in mind. But the first time, I had been to Colombia a couple of times before that, so I didn't necessarily think that was like one of those trips, or at least not one of the trips that I did after, or have been doing for the past 10 whatever something years. So yeah, so the first trip that kind of like, it was sort of the adventure style trips that I've been doing was when I actually went to Morocco. And that was, I mean, just traveling to Morocco for the first time by myself. Like, I had never been to Africa, and Morocco is very close to Europe. I just remember landing in Morocco, and I got off the plane, and I just stopped for a second, and I said to myself, like, I'm in Africa. To me, it was like one of those goals that I don't know that I always had, but it was just something surreal to me to actually be in Africa.
it's so
So
funny you mentioned that. I did the same thing when I was flying over because I had a layover in Dubai, and then from there I had to start flying down south to Cape Town. Same thing, once the sun came up, I peeked open the windows, like, holy shit, this is Africa.
Morocco was, yeah, it was definitely one of the first adventure trips that I had. Um, I and it was a very, very interesting trip, and the reason is because I thought I was just going to walk around in Morocco in the streets, and I was just going to raise my camera, and I was just going to photograph. We were talking about photographing incognito and like not letting people actually see you photographing. That was kind of my mindset, but Morocco is a different place. It's not a place where you just raise your camera to your eye and people are going to be okay with you taking a photo. It was completely the opposite. If they saw you with a camera, they would actually cover their face. So you didn't have to have your camera on your face. If
Ready to
they
shoot.
saw, say that again.
You didn't have to have it ready to shoot.
No, if you just had your camera hanging, people would look at you and it's like, okay, this guy is a tourist and this guy's a photographer, or he's going to try to take a photo of me. And Moroccans are like, they're a little bit different because they do not like their photo taken, especially from a stranger, or at least from a stranger. I can't talk about like, people they know, but yeah, that my very first experience was, there it's like I raised my camera, and people are actually yell at me. People are yelling at me because it's like, what are you doing? Like, why are you taking my photo? And it was like, it was loud. It was not like something very like courteous. It's like, don't take my photo. It was like, they were either, if they were far away, they would just kind of like block their face because they didn't want their photo taken. And it was a close-up thing, people would actually come up to me and like yell at me. So it was shocking, but it was also like, it was a challenge for me. And I felt to myself, I was like, I just made this trip to Africa. I'm here. I want to document. There's so much. The colors in it, the colors in Morocco, the architecture. If you go to Marrakesh, everything is just pink. I mean, it feels like you're back in like Roman times. That's kind of how it feels when you go to like Marrakesh and you go into these Medinas where you're walking around, and it's like, yeah, you're walking around in these Medinas, and it just feels like you're thrown back in time. And everything to me was just new, but it was also, it was like, I want to document this. I want to, I want to make sure that I capture everything that I see. And it was a huge, huge challenge because, like I said, anytime they saw my camera raised or anything like that, people would just start like either hiding their face or like yelling at me, or they would just kind of like walk away. So that was very interesting. And the way that I kind of like went around that was I decided to shoot with my iPhone. I had the 7D at the time, and like I said, I mean, these cameras are so big. Like when I do street photography, I want to be on the side. I don't want to be noticeable. I want to be like, I want to capture moments. Sometimes you're standing in a corner. Sometimes you're standing in a corner for, I could stand there for 10 minutes, but I don't want people to see me with a camera, because I want to capture a moment that just feels natural. It's like, I don't want people to see that what I'm actually photographing, or at least know that I'm taking a picture as they're walking. I want to be incognito at the time. So that's kind of how I felt. And with the 7D and just people like noticing you, it was a major challenge. So my workaround was shoot with my iPhone, and I ended up photographing with my iPhone most of the trip, and it was so much easier because it's small. It was the very first time that I mean, we had Instagram and we had this stuff, but it was the very first time where I felt like, okay, this is it. This is gonna be my camera for the time that I'm here in Morocco, because that is the only way. So I started photographing. I started taking like street photos. I definitely couldn't take any portraits because people were not like into that at all.
So do you remember which generation iPhone this was? I'm just
Mm.
curious.
This was
Was it the
back in
10 by then?
It was September 2013. No, iPhone 10, not even close.
No,
I want to
7,
say this was iPhone 5.
5.
I may be wrong. iPhone 5 or 6. I can't remember. Whatever iPhone they had in 2013, that's the iPhone that I was using. And the camera wasn't all that great, but yeah, it just made me just put my 7D away. There's some shots that I did get. So when I went to Merzouga, which is like the desert, like the sand dunes and stuff in Morocco, I actually used my 7D because the people there were like super cool. Like the tour guides and all that stuff, they didn't care. But in a place like Marrakesh, I went to Tangiers, which is like very close to Spain. And I also went to this small little town called Chefchaouen, which is a blue city. I was just forced to use the iPhone because it was just normal people, and I was just taking mostly candid street shots. And so yeah, if they saw my camera, they were just going to have an issue. And there was a couple of shots that I took where it's like people are holding their hand to their face, and I almost thought about just doing a project of like people just blocking their face, which I thought it was kind of interesting. But I just decided to kind of like mix it up a little bit and just kind of photograph everything that I saw that was interesting. The colors, like I said, they're incredible in Morocco. The pinks, the blues. So it's just a very interesting place, but it was very, very challenging. So that whole project was basically shot mostly with an iPhone.
It's funny because now that you're talking about that, because you see the big cultural difference. I think one thing we all tend to fail to do is to look up the cultural differences when we travel to their country. Because had you looked that up ahead of time, you would have known that they're not really photo friendly. Which
That's
honestly,
it.
I still admit I still don't do that today. I still don't look up any culture. I just go wing it.
That is actually an excellent point. And for somebody who is like looking into travel, and if they haven't traveled before, I think that's great advice to give them, is to actually look up the culture, look up what the country is like.
Mhm.
You can I did research on where I wanted to go, how I wanted to get there. But I never actually did research on like how Moroccans felt about photography, which it's not something that you think about.
You fall in love with the country.
On you. I mean, for me
I
personally, I
no
kind of say that about South Africa too. I mean, that was the first time where I went out on my own, and I'll always have that in my memory. It definitely left an impression. For me.
I I agree. I agree. And I did fall in love with Morocco because Morocco was that very first trip that was outside of my comfort zone. I had never been to the continent of Africa, and Morocco was just, it's a complete different culture. I mean, you go there, it's not
Movies.
it's not Latin America, it's not the United States, it's not places that I've kind of like been to where it's like, okay, I kind of know how people are here. So
Did you get
stepping in,
go to Casablanca?
so that trip, I actually landed in Casablanca, but I did not stay in Casablanca. What I
My
did
favorite
was I took a train from Casablanca to Marrakesh, and the train ride was awesome. If you know, one of the things I love about like traveling is if you ever get a chance to just take a train, it doesn't matter what type of train. It's like it's just so it feels peaceful, but it also just feels great traveling by train than by, you know, taking a plane from one city to another. Even a bus, I think it's cool because you're also kind of experiencing the culture, and you're, you know, I've done it in other countries where I taken a bus ride from like an 8 hour bus ride from one city to another, and while you're there for those 8 hours, like you'll see like the food vendors come in with the like in India it was like the mimosas. So yeah, so they walk in and it's like it's just part of the experience. It's part of like
Also, it's like the orange juice with the
With champagne.
yeah. So yeah. So like even riding a bus from one city to another, you're taking in the culture.
Where's
You're
the
taking
answer?
in the experience. Yeah, you're taking in the experience. So that's just part of like the whole journey of traveling, because it's not just, you know, taking the photos, but everything that you experience for the first time. It's what I enjoy about traveling. And so yeah, so I took a train from Casablanca to Marrakesh, and that was awesome. I mean, it was just like riding the train and like seeing people come in and out of that train, and seeing Moroccans from different places, different towns, just hopping in and out. It was great. It was an amazing experience. And then once you're there, I mean, part besides photography, it's like you get to meet people, and you get to meet different people from different parts of the world where they're just traveling at the same time. I met a lot of Australians while I was in Morocco. I felt like I met Australians all over. Everywhere I go, I meet Australians because they love to travel for like 6 months because they're so far, you know, they're so far away from everything else. So they tend to travel, you know, for long periods of time.
Long
So
trips. Wow, that's interesting to know about that culture, right?
yes, I mean, but like I said, I mean, Morocco to me, visually, completely striking. So, you know, coming from the States, coming from like South America as well, Morocco is just one of those places that is just absolutely beautiful because it's just so different from anything else that I knew at the
Like
time.
Flushing, maybe?
Flushing,
Yeah.
Flushing,
Well, I
yeah.
guess it's funny when we mentioned that too, because I guess the whole mindset thing and culture. I guess given the fact that I mean, you know, Lewis, you grew up here in the States, and you know, obviously, you know, I have as well, and Sebastian, you've been here just about forever too. I mean, without getting political, but we get used to, you know, I guess our First Amendment rights here, where you know you have the right to document anything in public. When you go to another country, you forget that hey, this isn't the States anymore. You know, like they have their own rules, their own culture, their own feelings about these things. So I guess that's one thing that you know we tend to always forget is that you know I guess you know we assume that we have that freedom, because that's in our culture. But we forget that, when we go somewhere else, we're not taking our culture with us. We have to respect the culture that's already there. So, but, and, we tend to forget that sometimes.
I
So I
don't
guess
want
that's
to
a common
disrespect
thing for a
any
lot of Americans
I
too.
don't want
But
to disrespect any Ecuadorians, but in Ecuador, if you go there and you go with a bunch of cameras, you're probably not gonna end up with any projects.
Yeah, I
well, funny
mean
you
it's
mention that because yeah,
The
Lewis, you did that,
cameras,
right? You went to what is it, a country
but
that
I was
borders
lucky.
Venezuela
I
and
think
Colombia, I think, and you said that you actually had to hire police escort there, right?
yeah,
where
that was a trip I did in 2019. So I was born in Venezuela. I'm half Colombian. My dad is Colombian. My mom's Venezuelan. But we left Venezuela when I was young. I wasn't that young. I was about 8 when I came to the States. But we don't want to get political, but Venezuela has for the last 20-25 years has gone through what I like to call what I like to call a dictatorship, but that's a whole different story. It's not a country that you can kind of go there and like,
you
you're gonna
don't
have
like
the
to call
freedom
it.
to
A
talk
lot of
about.
everybody else likes to call it the same way, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't want to get political, but basically, it's not a country that I can't go back to my country and just act normal, like you can act in other countries. So
Well,
that's the
currently
situation in
it's not
Venezuela. So
tourist friendly. That's the best way to put it. Currently, it's not tourist friendly.
with that trip to Colombia, that was a very interesting trip, and it was probably the most personal trip I've ever had. Reason being, like I said, I'm from Venezuela, and I came to the States back in 1989, so it's been a long time, and I never went back to Venezuela. And partly is because of the political situation in Venezuela. So being also half Colombian, I had been to Colombia. I knew that I can go to Colombia, and kind of get close to Venezuela. And that was the whole point. I mean, there was a lot of migrants leaving Venezuela at that time. There's a lot of migrants leaving Venezuela right now, but at the time there was a lot of people literally walking from Venezuela to Colombia, and then trying just hitching rides from Colombia. They had some family in Colombia, they had family in Ecuador, they had family in Peru, all the way down to Chile and Argentina. So what these people do is they just flee the country. They call them los caminantes. And the reason they call them that is just because they're just walking, and they're just trying to get to whatever country their family is in. And at the same time just kind of go there and try to find a better life for themselves, and better jobs. So what I did was basically I traveled to Colombia, and I went to the border of Colombia and Venezuela. Now, what's interesting is that the place that I actually went to, the city is called Cucuta, Colombia, and I was born like literally an hour away on the other side, on the opposite side, in Venezuela. So I was born in about an hour away from there. So it was very personal to me, because we used to actually, when we were kids, our dad used to take us to Cucuta to go shopping. So, it was like an hour drive to Colombia from Venezuela, where we lived. And we actually would go shopping in Colombia, and, come back. So this is where I grew up. Literally, I grew up in this area. Sorry?
That was me. I was checking that there's a documentary on called Caminantes.
Yes.
There's
But
actually.
what does that translate to? I'm curious, because I don't speak Spanish. So what does that mean?
It's like Johnny Walker.
Yeah, it just means the walkers, the people who are walking to other countries.
Caminante no hay camino, se hace camino al andar.
So yeah, so basically on that trip, it was
somebody that walks, to people, just to people in general that just walk. And
so when you were on that trip, like I mentioned earlier, you did hire armed guards, or I guess the police, to actually escort you around. How did the town folks take to that, seeing you walking around with a camera and I guess armed escort? I mean, was that a little weird? I mean, I guess it must be. It's not normal to see some guy with a camera and cops, right?
It was an interesting thing, because I didn't go there with the plan of hiring police officers to escort me to the border, because the border there's a lot of things happening in that border. They're smuggling drugs, they're smuggling, they're trafficking humans as well. So there's a lot of things, and there's guerrillas on the Colombian side, and then there's the colectivos, which is like people that are hired by the government of Venezuela to kind of like keep an eye on their people and put them in check. So these are like civilians that are armed by the government of Venezuela, and they just kind of like, they're kind of like the civilian police, but they're not really. They're really to with a lack of a better word, to fuck with people. So they had the colectivos on the Venezuelan side. There's guerrillas on the Colombian side. There's drugs being smuggled, but there's also, regular people trying to cross the border. It was kind of like an open border at the time when I was there. So I remember going with my brother-in-law, and I had a friend of mine that it was a friend of mine in New York that connected me with a person there in Colombia. And it was basically us three. I think my brother-in-law's brother was also there. But what we did, we actually went to the border by ourselves, and we realized, and I remember that I was standing there, and there was these colectivos actually taking photos of me with their cell phones, because I was kind of documenting the situation there. So what happened was, because I had that friend that was living in Cucuta and he knew the area. He said, "Hey, this is not the most ideal thing for us to be kind of like, hanging out here with expensive cameras and just kind of document this stuff in a very dangerous area." So what we did was, we went back. We were there for maybe half an hour. I was photographing a little bit, but we just kind of felt uncomfortable, and we ended up taking a cab and just going back. So I remember, we went back to the hotel. We went to a bar, and we just started kind of planning for the next morning, because we wanted to go in the morning, and we started kind of planning and talking about what would be the best way to actually do this, because my point wasn't just to document people just walking. I wanted to stop people and actually take a portrait of them as they were crossing the border. So my plan, I had gone with a plan, and my plan was to actually use a flash with a softbox and stop people, ask them a little bit, just very quick, like a minute, where they're from, where were they going, what was their situation like. And I was just going to actually go there, and just basically take portraits of these people, as they walked. So in order for me to do that, we needed a little bit of protection. So what we did was, there was a police station very close by, and I remember just walking up to the police station, and I just walked inside, and I, in my mind, I was thinking, this is not going to happen. Like, these guys are going to be like, who are you? Like, so I walk in there and I say, listen, I'm a photographer. I'm documenting this situation that's happening in the border. And I was just hoping that we could get like one police officer or something like that to actually protect us while we're doing this. The guy looked at me and said, "How many people do you need?" They didn't ask me for credentials. They didn't ask me, am I a reporter? Am I a photojournalist for a specific? All he said is, "How many people do you need?" And I said, I don't remember saying anything, but next thing you know, there's like 4 police officers with horses, coming towards me, and they're like, and the guy just said, how much time do you need? And I said, like, an hour. So I actually, yeah. So these guys, so I'm walking from the police station, which is maybe like half a mile from the border, and I'm walking with my brother-in-law, my friend Jose, and we have four police officers on horses behind us. So that's when I felt safe. That's when I took out my camera and I just started walking, and I just felt like, wow, this is just incredible that I'm actually going to be able to do this project while I have a police protection. And I never thought in my mind that I would actually get like 4 police officers. So we walked to the right to the border, and that's what I did. I mean, I started like stopping people and just kind of interviewing them very, very quickly, just kind of asking them where they were from, and what was their situation like. And I had one of the my brother-in-law holding the flash with the softbox while I was actually shooting the portraits. So it was one of the most stressful, even with the police officers there, it was one of the most stressful things that I've ever done in terms of photography. But it was amazing just to be able to do that. And yeah, that was the day that we were in the border. And then the rest of the time that I was there, because it was dangerous there, I didn't go back. I just ended up going back. I ended up going more into the mountains in Colombia and photographing these other Venezuelans who I met along the way, and kind of documenting the situation that was happening at the time. And there's a lot of stories within that trip. I mean, I can just go on and on and on, but that was the main thing with like the police officers and kind of photographing in that situation on that border.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. I think of the three of us, you probably travel the most. I mean, I haven't done as much as you, that's for sure. I think after that, I did a trip to Ireland, which luckily I had family there, so that made it a bit easier. And then during the same trip, I also headed over to Paris for a couple of days too. I mean,
So
nothing as dramatic as you. So
that's why your last name is O'Brien, Johnny
yeah,
O'Brien.
pretty much. It's probably from all the Guinness I've been drinking. I don't know.
Well, you can definitely drink a Guinness. I know that, Johnny.
Well, I still remember how you kept saying my trip to Ireland was completely useless. I did almost nothing there that most tourists would do.
Which, by the way, I have a very unique story with Johnny. I invited Johnny to a party, and you know that story, Johnny. Volkswagen.
Oh yeah.
You
I
go to
hope
the
your
Yeah,
party?
sister doesn't
we'll
doesn't hear
we'll
about
leave
that
that story for another time.
stuff. Now what was the equipment you had on that trip? Do you remember? I know it's definitely a Sony at that time because you already transitioned over to Sony, if I'm not mistaken. So
Yeah, this was 2019, so I had
A7R2, R3, or something like that.
honestly, it's just kind of hard to like keep up
Remember?
with to remember what I had because I kind of changed it quite a bit. But I was definitely I took my 2470. I took my 16 to 35. I think for a lot of my travel, and eventually we're going to have the director of LaGuardia, Scott Sternback, on the show as a guest.
I agree
But
already.
Retired director. Because remember, Hugo's now the new director, so he's a retired director.
yes, that is correct.
Yeah, I
That is
know it's so
correct.
hard for us to get it out of our minds because he was always known as the director for
Well,
us.
at
But
least I guess I meant well the time we were there. He was the director
At
yeah,
least I was able
for
to
LaGuardia.
photograph him, that's for sure.
So anyway, and that's one thing I want to mention to him is because I one of the lenses that I love for travel photography is my 16 to 35. I can't live without that lens because um I remember walking into Scott's office one time and he had this print of one of his portraits from Alaska, and it was like this guy on a boat, um kind of pointing. I don't know if you guys remember that when you walked into his office at the
Yeah.
time, but he was kind of pointing. And Scott was one of those guys who loved to shoot wide with like the 16 millimeter, at least on the 16 or 35, but with that 16 millimeter, those wide angle portraits. And I remember looking at that photo and I thought that was like the coolest shot. And one of my inspirations was that photo and Scott shooting with such a wide angle that there's a lot of portraits that I have that are kind of wide angle. It's not the most ideal, you don't tend to shoot portraits with a 16 millimeter lens or even in the 20 millimeter range. But I always loved that look, and I kind of made it part of like my style to shoot with the 16 to 35. So I had a 16 to 35, I had my 2470, and I think I had my 85 because for this stuff, I wanted to make sure I had my 85. It's small, it's compact, it's the 1.8, and that's kind of the lens that I use for portraits. But so mostly those shots in the border with the 2470 because it's just versatile and it's like you can get tighter if you need to without having to change. And I had no time. I had zero time to be switching lenses at that moment. So
it's funny you mentioned that. I mean, about Scott using 16 to 35 for portraits. Honestly, that's probably one of the most challenging things you can do because once you exceed 28 millimeters, and the wide angle distortion becomes an issue, and most human features aren't really designed for something that wide. So, like you said, I do vaguely remember that photo for that thing to be that exaggerated, with the wide angle, it actually does work quite well. So, I mean, that is quite interesting because not everyone can shoot with
so
ultra
the
wide
main
for
so the main
portraits.
thing shooting wide is it's not just a portrait, it's an environmental portrait. So you're photographing the subject, but you're also photographing the environment that they're in at the
That
time.
is correct, but at the same time, once you exceed 28 millimeters, you generally have distortion that is not, pleasing, on,
100,
a human
100,
subject. But that's why I'm saying
100.
so impressive. It definitely is interesting and
No, 100%.
challenging
It's
to
a
do
it's a
so.
this 100%. It's a distorted image. It's not going to be one of these compressed portraits. It's wide angle. It's an environmental portrait. You're gonna
But
have
it works. That's the
distortions.
thing. So yeah,
Yeah, you're gonna have distortions, and that's just part of it. I mean, that photograph that Scott had, the guy's kind of like pointing his arm, so the arm is extended. It's like it's distorted, but that's part of like the whole idea of shooting with a wide angle. It's not going to be proportional at all. And I have quite a few portraits. I have a lot of portraits like that where it's like, an arm can be distorted or the head can be a little bit distorted, but the whole idea is just kind of capturing that subject in that specific environment as well.
Yeah, one thing I'll always remember about shooting wide, a friend of mine, Brent, he always told me because I asked him, how do you shoot wide? And he says the most important thing about shooting wide is you have to have an interesting foreground because everything else becomes so small that, you have to place something that anchors, the viewers in that photo. And for me, as you know, I'm horrible with wide angles. I generally do, normal and telly and beyond, but, that's always that I find challenging. So it's interesting to see people, being able to use wide angles so effectively, which I have to learn. So.
Yeah. So yeah. Just to answer your question, that I think that's the three main lenses that I took because it pretty much covers everything: the wide, the mid range, and then the 85 is just a portrait lens for specific shots.
So with that being said, good thought exercise. Given the fact that you brought quite a bit of gear, if given your experience today, after all the experience you've gathered with all your travels, would you have changed that setup and use something and bring something differently today, or would you still bring the same setup?
In terms of like camera and lenses,
Yes, would you still bring the same equipment, or would you bring something drastically different or simpler? What would you do if you were to redo that trip today?
I don't change it. I don't change it because I think my style has those three lenses kind of cover what I want to do in terms of like you know sometimes you look at your work and you may not see it you may not see a specific style, but people look at your work and they kind of tell you, okay, you have this kind of style. And I think my style is not all wide angle environmental portraits. I have those tight shots of just like the face, kind of concentrated on just the subject's face, just a very tight portrait. But I think those three lenses cover what I tend to shoot. So to answer your question, I don't think I would change. I would change maybe maybe a different version of those same lenses, but in terms of
Well,
like the three types of lenses, I would not change.
yeah, the reason why I'm asking is because I always think back of the trip we went that we took when we went to Chile back in 2012. And as you remember, I brought everything and the kitchen sink. You guys gave me the nickname of B&H before I even got the job there. But I think I wouldn't bring the same things I brought, on that trip today, given how I shoot now. That's why I've always been thinking about that because back on that trip, I doubt you guys remember all the gear I had on me, but I had a 1DS Mark II, I had the 2470 2.8 Canon L, I had the 100-400 the first generation, I had a 10 stop, or actually I think it's a 13 stop neutral density filter. I had the Canon point and shoot SD 550 in my pocket, right up by my shoulder strap, by my strap. I had a mechanical F1 with a circular fisheye. I had the EF 15 mil fish. I literally brought everything in the kitchen sink and then some. And I gotta say, looking at all my stuff from back then, I hated almost everything I shot. Nothing was good. So I think if I was to redo a trip like that, instead of bringing everything in the kitchen sink, I think I might just bring, honestly, today, maybe one body, and like three lenses at the most. Maybe, like a wide, a 35 or 50, and then maybe like a 135 at most. And I think I'm done. I mean, but I find,
Yeah, I think
yeah, I find I was too worried about, missing the shot to the point where I visually and mentally missed the shot. I had everything laid out. I think I had the most focal lengths out of all of us. But the problem is, with all that, I think I just overburdened myself and I can't, I guess, lock down a vision or a particular shooting style because I had so much, just overwhelming me gear wise.
I think what you bring has a lot to do with what your intent of shooting on that trip is. And I think for me, my intent has always kind of been the same. Um,
which
you
is
know, environmental portraits. So that's why I have my 16 to 35 all the time. Close up, portraits as well. There's, like I said, I have quite a few shots where I kind of focus just on the subject's face and have, with that 85 is just very compressed. You can get that background pretty, close. And then the 2470 is just so versatile where, if you're shooting something on the street where it's just, you don't have the time to like switch lenses and you're just trying to capture something, you can zoom in and out. Personally, I now I feel like I prefer more of like the prime lenses, but for traveling, I think you're covering everything there: the 16 to 35, 2470, and an 85 millimeter
35
prime
millimeter.
lens.
Do you think you can use a 35 millimeter for portraits?
Yeah, I mean, you can do full body portrait with a 35.
Yeah, it's
What
funny because I see
what
myself
about a
probably traveling
close
more
up?
with 35.
What was your question, Sebastian?
Like a close up? No, really, right? There don't be too much
Not
time.
really. I mean, might get a little bit distorted, but you
Well, that
can use
sounds like something you
you
guys got
can
to
use it.
test out one of these days. Grab a 35 and try to do some, tight
Well,
headshot
I
with it
just
and see how
remember.
that
I
turns out.
remember from shooting. I remember the 1635 was one of my favorites, just because the versatility. You get the environment with that, and you can get a portrait as well.
You're
It's
also going,
not
when you're traveling, you don't know what you're going to run into. You may run into a situation where you may see something that's very interesting to photograph, but you don't have a lot of room. You don't have a lot of room to actually shoot with a 50 or an
more
85.
time to go to the
So
place
that
and
having that
photo
16
and telephoto.
having that 16 millimeter is huge because like we went to when we were in Chile and we were in those marble caves. Like, you're not shooting with a 50 or an 85 with those those caves. You have to shoot wide because we're it's very tight spaces, and
Yeah.
that's one of the ways you're going to cover situations like that.
Or the question is, could you? We don't know. I mean, because again, you have a particular vision at those focal lengths, but what if, the person only had a 50? Because I remember Ronald, when he was on that trip, he was shooting with his Mamiya. If I remember correctly, it was mostly an 80 mil, which is roughly equivalent in 645 to a little bit more than, 50. So maybe like 55 or something. So he did his entire trip, I think, with just one lens and, one camera body. So, and I know he was shooting Marble Caves too. Granted, I don't remember what his results were, but, I think it is doable if you have a different vision. The problem, I guess, with you and I, and I guess even Sebastian, is that we have this idea with so many different focal lengths. That's why I feel sometimes you just narrow it down, say only one lens. Say you don't like 50, just 35 only. That could kind of clear out your mind because now your mind's not all over the place creatively. You just got this one angle to work with and one view point of view to focus on. So I think that kind of frees you up and kind of force you to be creative and have the versatility to allow you to do a little bit of everything. I don't know. I mean, it's something I keep thinking about lately. So
Yeah, that's a good point. That's definitely a good point.
yeah, this is coming from the guy who used to carry the kitchen sink. So I'm just saying.
No,
You did. I mean, your bag.
now that I've been thinking about it, I've been quiet most of the entire, this whole segment, but it's because I've been thinking about a lot of all this stuff that I do really in terms of street photography. You know what I'm saying? And it really has been my kids, and when I go around, and I'm not talking about my kids in terms of like, oh, I want a nice picture of, no. I mean, moments, important moments, and then my life. I mean, so I don't know. I think there was there's a transition. Obviously, there was a fall of practice in a period of time in me that I didn't really, because now that I think about it, I traveled to a couple of places that I could have had really great images, like Saint Martin, Jamaica, and in these couple of places that I mean, I went to Ecuador a few times, Colombia, and I spent literally probably like a month in Colombia, and I realized, wow, I didn't really. I mean, I took pictures with my phone most of the time with an iPhone, and I kept that in the back of my head. I mean, I was trying to use RAW in my head because the image will get better within the phone, but I've done some of that stuff. It's interesting how we see it. Um, and yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully, we can start putting stuff together. And see what happens.
Well, that being said, that could be the next one. So how do we shoot that? I think this week, Lewis, you're going to be showing us something. This is from one of your travels. So which particular trip was this from that this photo you're going to be showing us?
Yeah. So
Wow.
this particular shot is it's from a trip that I went to Mongolia, and I want to say this was back in 2019. But yeah, this was a trip to Mongolia. It was definitely one of those adventurous trips, one of the most adventurous trips I had, because another place that I never thought in my life that I would actually end up like visiting. But it was one of those places that I had seen photos from other photographers, and I just felt like it was a place that if I had a chance to do it, I would actually go and I definitely want to go and document that country. So what I did was, I went to Mongolia. I went to the main city. Mongolia, the country is very there's not a lot of big cities. It's just one big city. It's Ulaanbaatar. And I ended up going to Ulaanbaatar, and I stayed in a hostel for like I want to say I stayed maybe there for one night. And while I was at the hostel, I I talked to the people there, and I told them, listen, I want to go to Olgi, which is Ulaanbaatar is like on the east side of Mongolia, and I wanted to go all the way to the west because that's where the national parks were, and that's where the nomadic people are in Mongolia. So I always had this vision of photographing these nomads with these eagles. And that if you search Mongolia photography, that's mostly what you're going to see. You're going to see a lot of these nomadic people with these incredible eagles, and that's what I wanted to photograph. So I ended up booking a guide the first night that I was in Ulaanbaatar, and the next morning I'm on a plane heading west to meet this guide, and she was a great person. I was actually I had a female guide. Her husband was my driver, so it was a team basically. They took people out to the mountains out there, and I remember meeting them. The first thing they did was like, okay, this is where you're staying tonight. Tomorrow morning we're gonna pick you up, and we're just gonna head out. So we ended up, they picked me up in the morning. We went to the supermarket. They grabbed a bunch of stuff. They never actually explained to me the whole trip. They just said, we're going to take you to places, but they never explained to me in detail of how this trip was going to go about. So the next thing you know, we're on this, we're at the supermarket. Like, she's grabbing like meats, she's grabbing all this stuff, and like she's packing stuff in like a cooler, a freezer, and packing a bunch of like meals and stuff like. I didn't realize at the time that as soon as we left that town that I met them, there was going to be zero Wi-Fi, zero internet, and I was about to spend a week with them. So we ended up heading out, and I remember not telling like my family. I was like, I'm not gonna have Wi-Fi for a week. So next thing you know, it's like I'm going on this trip. Like we're driving for like 8 hours through these mountains, just incredible scenery, and I had zero connection with like the rest of the world, zero connection with anybody else because there were no other tourists. And I remember like we had to check in into like one of the national parks there, and when we got there, she's like, "Give me your passport." I gave her my passport. She walks in, and the guy tells her he's literally the only tourist at this time right now in the whole national park. So I was the only person there that from outside the country that was actually going into that park at that time. So it was a real very surreal experience. So I got to I got to meet a few different nomadic people there. I ended up staying in like four different houses where these people, they own the land. They're just living in the middle of like nowhere. And when I say the middle of nowhere, it's their house, and there's just like nothing else for miles and miles away. And they have their own cattle, they have their own goats, they have their own sheep, they have their chickens. I stayed in one place where the guy literally had four wolves, and he had them chained up. And as soon as he walked to them, like they would just like kind of like they would just they would be submissive to him. The main point of that trip was I wanted to photograph these nomadic people with their eagles. And at that time there was the Eagle Festival where there was a gathering of like 100 people with I must have seen maybe 50, 60 eagles. I've never seen an eagle like in person, like just like that. And next thing I know, it's like I'm literally in front of like 50 different types of eagles. It's just insane. So we ended up walking up to a hill. I had a Profoto B10 at the time with me. I took an umbrella. So a collapsible umbrella, super easy to use because you're not dealing with like setting up. You just open it up. I put the diffuser in front of the umbrella, threw in the Profoto B10, had a small little stand, a portable stand, and the driver, the driver, which is the husband of my guide, he was the one just kind of like holding my stand and my flash for all these shots. So that's one of the things when I travel is I always found somebody. It wasn't hard for me to find somebody to always kind of assist me because obviously a lot of these portraits I would shoot with a flash. So I always needed somebody to kind of hold the flash. And that's kind of how I did this photo. And basically, it was one of those things. The sun was kind of setting, and I saw it as I grabbed one of the subjects there. His eagles. The eagles were kind of like they would obey them, but they would at the same time. I think the flash was bothering them. So as I was taking photos, the eagle would kind of like start flapping his wings, and it's like maybe the flash was a little bit annoying to them. But I remember seeing the sun just kind of like setting, and there was a little gap between the subject and the eagle. And at first it wasn't intentional, but as soon as I saw that, I was like, I gotta try to get this shot. I gotta try to make it. And I think it's a little bit of like luck and a little bit of like trying to like make it happen as far as like the sun rays kind of going through the eagle. But it was one of those shots I just kept shooting, and at some point I took the shot, and then I stopped for a little bit. I looked at the back of the camera. Once I saw it, I was like, that's it, like this is the shot. And that's kind of like the story about with that photograph.
That's interesting. I was actually going to ask you how many shots do you actually take? Because I mean, as you know, nowadays well into the digital era now. I mean, I can't say nowadays because digital been around for over 20 plus or 30 plus years. Most people tend to just blast away. And like you said, was that one shot, the only shot you took and ended up being, I guess you could say, the final shot, or did you actually take a good, handful before you actually got to that? Given the fact that you said that the flash was annoying, the eagle. So, how many shots do you take to achieve the one that you're
For
showing
that
us?
specific subject, that one subject.
Mm-hmm.
No, I didn't have these people for a very long time. I think 5 minutes tops. They were competing, and there was actually a competition of like, who was the fastest eagle to like fly down the mountain. So there was a guy at the very bottom on a horse with a giant piece of meat. And these eagles, like their eyesight is just like incredible. So as soon as they see it, the eagle goes, and there's somebody timing him. And so they were all competing. So it wasn't like they were just kind of sitting around. So I knew I didn't have that much time. I think 5 minutes on average I took to like photograph each subject. So this was the most interesting one because this was at the time of sunset. So I kind of got him when that sun was just falling down. And that's when it was one of those, as I was looking through the viewfinder, that's when I saw the sun just kind of like creeping through the eagle's neck right there between the eagle and the subject. And that's when I said, I probably took like maybe 15, 20 shots of that until I actually got it to where I felt like it was perfect. And that was the shot that I ended up choosing.
Oh, now I can see why the Eagles pissed. You took like 20 shots, flashing them right in the face.
Yes.
I can
No,
see why.
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. The Eagles were like, and these Eagles are like, they kind of look small, but as soon as they open their wings, it's just like these are incredible creatures. Absolutely incredible.
All right, yeah, I mean that was definitely interesting. So, with that being said, I wonder what we'll have for next week's. I guess how'd you do that? So, that should be
That,
interesting
that,
next week.
that will be Sebastian's. How'd you do that?
This week's this or that is going to be done by me, and we shall see. Which one would you choose, this one or that one?
All right,
So,
let's hear it.
in light of our topic of travel for this particular episode, I will have to ask you, I guess, this or that based on travel photography or travel in general. So if you were given 2 weeks to travel to the opposite coast, 'cause I guess that'll only, make sense as we're both on opposite coasts, would you prefer driving or flying, and why?
That's very easy for me.
All right, let's hear it. Why is it so easy
Dri-
for you?
Driving. If you're talking coast to coast, driving. If I have the time,
Well, you got 2 weeks.
100%. If
You
I
have
have
two
two
weeks.
weeks, 100% driving. I mean, it's if you're gonna fly from one coast to the other, your experience and your experience in being in a tube for 4 or 5 hours, versus taking a road trip and kind of stopping in different places. There's a lot of incredible national parks and landscapes in the West Coast. I mean, you can make it an incredible experience by driving and like seeing all these places, and then just even getting to the other side of the country on the East Coast. You're gonna go into like amazing towns and places that are, whether they're famous or not, you're gonna have an experience in these places as well.
Fair point. Sebastian?
I mean, it should be really easy for me.
Should be.
I think it's very, yeah, I'll choose drive. Same reason. Um, Driving gives you the opportunity to get to know, just the people, um, find experiences. It really, at that point, that decision will have to be made depending on what the situation is. But yeah, I will choose driving any time of the day.
Fair point. Yeah, for me, I guess it depends on where we're going for that trip. I mean, I know I said opposite coast, but if I'm heading to maybe where Lewis is at, then maybe I'll drive. Just because the reason why I hate flying right now, personally, well, as you know, I tend to shoot film, so I hate having to have my film X-rayed. Because it's a pain in the ass. Even though in theory they said that if it's under ISO 800, you don't need to worry about it. But again, just for that extra safety precaution, I'd rather not deal with that. And I don't know, flying it just becomes such a pain now. I mean, it's not fun. You're in economy, you're cramped, especially with camera bags and other stuff. At that point in time, I think I'd rather drive. But again, if I'm heading a bit further than where Lewis is at, because no offense, I just think Vegas, you could realistically only spend no more than 2 days in, Vegas, the city, but everything else around it is where the fun is, like Death Valley and, Grand Canyon and all that stuff. If I was heading out to say San Francisco, then I'd probably just fly because that's just a little bit too far, on the other side. And I'd rather just get there and spend most of the time in that city than I would actually, commute back and forth. So I guess it depends on where specifically the other side is. So for me, the majority, ideally, based on what I shoot and how I shoot, driving. But if I'm going to, I guess, the city with more things to do, I'd probably just fly and do whatever I got to do there and then fly back. So that's my opinion of that.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. This one, may seem kind of weird for me to ask, but would you prefer carrying your gear in a backpack or a messenger bag when you're traveling?
Me?
Whoever. I mean, you tell me.
Backpack or messenger bag?
I don't think I've ever. I think I used a messenger bag when I was in LaGuardia, but not even for. It was not even for photo gear. It was just like to keep my books and stuff.
Yeah, you gave it
I
to
think
me
that
as an American Eagle one.
yes,
Yeah, you
yeah.
gave
I'm,
it to
I'm
me. I still have
surprised
it.
you
It's upstairs.
remember.
It's still upstairs in my closet. So
I'm surprised you remember, but yeah, that's the only messenger bag I ever had. It's not. I mean, the bag that I would use for travel photography is going to be determined by the amount of gear that I'm taking. Um, I tend to, when I travel, I don't use luggage. I don't use like, regular luggage to go on these trips. I usually use like a backpacker's, one of those Osprey, backpacks, and I mostly stuff it with like photo gear and stands and tripods. And then, probably 75% of it is gear and 25% is actual clothing. Because, when I go on these trips, I'm more focused on the photography side than like literally trying to figure out what I'm going to be wearing and stuff like that. Obviously, if you go in a cold place, you want to make sure that you're bringing the right clothing for that type of environment. But mostly, yeah, to answer your question, it's going to depend mostly on the type of gear that I'm using for that particular trip. So, yeah, that
So
would
your
be
most
that.
recent trip, what was it?
The most recent trip, it's actually been 2 years since I traveled, but I did Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, and then I went to India. That was a month, and the only time I've traveled for a month with you guys to Chile, and then that was a whole month. But like I said, it was mostly photo gear, and it was my Osprey backpack.
All right, okay, it is. Sebastian?
Just because of my back, I will say herniated disc. I'm gonna say a backpack. It's easier. Even though I've been using a lot of just messenger bags, honestly, because that's what I have. But yeah, backpack. For traveling, it's you can clip things in. So if you're like, that's what I've done when now I'm just remembering from a few trips that I've done. It's having just places where to put the camera sometimes, but it's really just where you can clip it on or have it next to you right away, easy access. I would say a backpack just because it's safer to keep the stuff on. That's what I'll go with. Yeah, it's
Interesting. So that's two for backpacks. For me personally, as you guys remember, I used to be a backpack person. Honestly, lately, for me, it's a messenger bag. Just 'cause I love how low key it is. Because like you said, Lewis, you only use the messenger bag once upon a time for notebooks and stuff like that for school. If I carry a messenger bag today, that's what everybody just assumes. I don't really look touristy because just about every culture, men has either a satchel or a messenger bag or something like that. I think backpacks for me now, given the type of gear I use, it's just a bit too bulky, and I think it just screams tourist or oh hey, you might have some valuable in there. And the problem with backpacks for me also is anytime you take out gear, you tend to have to lay your bag down. You expose all your gear to everyone around you. Versus a messenger bag, I just flip it open, grab what I need, it's right there, and that's it. So I mean, again, obviously there's other backpacks that allow you to do the same thing, but for me, as of late, given the simplicity of my gear, since I don't carry everything in the kitchen sink anymore, it's been messenger bag for me generally.
Are you using my
So,
messenger bag from?
nah, yours is for storage. I got other stuff in there. So, but yeah, I did use it for a little bit though, but that was probably over 10 years ago now. So,
Yeah, I can't believe that bag is still around, to be honest.
it's still here. Yeah, I mean, next time you come by the house, I'll show you.
Yeah.
Um, all right. So, moving on. Next question. This might get a little interesting because this is going to touch back on what you guys said last week. So, if you're traveling, these are the only two items you can use for shooting, and there won't be any posts or anything. So forget cropping. It's just whatever the image is. Your phone, which is normally 28 mil. So just say it's fixed 28 for your cell phone, or a camera with a 50 millimeter lens. So a
Oh
28 mil off
man,
your iPhone or 50 mil with the camera. That's your choice.
you want me to answer, or you want to go first, Sebastian?
he's an asshole. But because I hate the freaking 50 millimeter lens, and I thought it was finally I got it out of my chest, and now he's revisiting this thing, and I believe
Oh, I have to.
I will probably choose the 50 millimeter lens just because
Nice.
So that's what I'm saying. That's what I'll do. I mean, a camera is a camera. So the phone is amazing. You get to do whatever you want. But if I were to choose to do a painting with oil paint, I go with oil in a canvas. If I wanted to just choose an oil pastel, I'll pick a paper, and that's what I'll do. But if I want to do photography, I'll prefer to use a camera than to use a phone. Even though the phones are nowadays just as good and you can literally use it for anything. I personally believe that nowadays we're very lucky to have that. And yet, whoever says that, wants to be a photographer and they love to do this, if they're not doing it, it's because they just really don't want to do it. Because now you can have it. But I will choose, yeah, 50 millimeter lens. I hate it. I will probably break it afterwards. I'll just throw it out and make sure that, I'll never use it again.
Well, now I know. I'm not going to loan you any 50 mils. Good to know.
By the way, I need one. No, just kidding.
You have one. I gave you one. Lewis, what about you? 50 mil with the camera or your phone shooting 28 mil, you cannot crop. And no posts or anything.
I have used my phone for some travel photography, like I mentioned, in Morocco, where the situation was not ideal for regular camera, but I would always choose a camera over a phone any day, even with a 50 millimeter.
Oh my God, the way you guys are saying it.
Yeah, even with I mean, I would have to kind of, yeah. I mean, a camera and a lens is a lens, and at that point, I would just have to, deal with it. I don't like shooting with a 50 millimeter, but I feel like, if I have to do it, then I always, like Sebastian said, I'll always choose a camera over a phone if I have the option to. So definitely the camera with a 50.
All right, so obviously for me, that's an easy answer. I mean, it's hands down with the 50 mil. That's not even a question. So, moving on.
Yeah.
Think about this. Like you're hiding behind. It's like having a camera. It's like it. Even though you're like right there, you're literally hiding behind the camera. If obviously you're not shooting with a four, like with a twin lens.
Which level yet?
You are, but if you're covering yourself, think about that. You're literally covering your face. You're covering yourself, and it's like hiding behind a pole that that everybody can see. So everybody's, you're like this, but everybody can see you. So the camera, it's also a way of, you know,
Removing yourself from the scene, essentially.
and keeping you safe in a way, even though that can be very dangerous. But yeah, I don't know. Anyway, next topic. Go ahead. Sorry, I just wanted to say that.
All right, yeah, I mean, that's just interesting to know because the next question I'm about to ask you guys is somewhat relevant to that. Now, I understand that you both have experience with twin lens reflex camera, like your Rolleiflex, and you guys both have had experience with a Hasselblad. So my question is, if you were traveling right now and you have a Rolleiflex with your 75 mil or 80 mil, or a Hasselblad with 80 mil, which one would you prefer? And
That's
why?
a interesting question. Sorry. That's an interesting question. I have a Rolly and I love my Rolly. I always wanted to own a Hasselblad. That's my secret of the day. Is the Hasselblads are just gorgeous cameras. Um, and I think that it's a tough question because I do love the Rolly, and I think the Rolly is a little bit more compact, or at least I feel like it's a little bit more compact than a Hasselblad. Um, I don't think I would go wrong with either one. If I have to choose one, it's tough. But since I have my Rolly, I'm gonna go with the Rolly because it's what I have. I still love it. I mean, I love the twin lens setup, the square format. Hasselblad is a square format as well. If I had a Hasselblad, my point is, if I had a Hasselblad, I would shoot with the Hasselblad. But since I have a Rolly, I'm gonna go with the Rolly.
But if you had both, which one would you shoot with more?
You
I'm
have
gonna I'm gonna go with the Rolly
why?
because I have a Rolly, and I'm not going to
But if you had both, that's the thing. If you had both right in front of you, you get to choose which one you want. You have to go use.
I'm gonna go with the Rolly. I'm
Gotcha. All
sticking
right.
to the Rolly.
Pick
All
it
right.
up with a Rolly.
I respect that. Sebastian?
Well, I had the opportunity, thanks to like again the school, I had the opportunity to travel with both the twin lens reflex that I think Christoph, gave to me or lent me, or I don't remember at the time. It was Christoph or it was one of the school cameras. But I also traveled with, or one of you guys was traveling with a medium format, but we traveled with all of that to Chile. And I actually traveled to Ecuador with that as well, with a medium format, a 35 millimeter, the view camera. I'm a maniac, just carrying all this crazy heavy gear. the Hasselblad, it's amazing. Hasselblad is just friggin', it's a machine, you know. But I will choose the twin slits. I love it. I love both. I love both machines, but I will go with the twin slits. Just it's more flexible. It's easier, faster. You grab it. You know, you can go more incognito with that. Plus, it sparks better conversation. It's cute. I don't know. I like the feeling of putting that little tiny box next to your, literally on your, on your belt, on your waist, and looking down. If you have the right, if you have, because you can adjust right there, with the little things, you can adjust distance. If you know the light, if you have a good light meter, if you need it, or if you already know your formula, whatever you're gonna shoot that day, depending on what you have already set up. That'll be the two instance. Yeah,
That's interesting.
it's very cool. It's really nice. It can get, look, it can be intimate, and it can disappear at this, like it can be like something where it can be the main subject, like where it can stand out. You know what I'm saying? Like if people will see it and be like, oh, what is that? And it just becomes the center of attention. But just like it can become the center of attention, the camera, it can disappear just by where you place it, by keeping it on the side, having everything ready and then just shooting. Because if somebody can see you, I've done it where I've shot and I already knew. I just had it here and I'm looking around and I'm just observing, and then just pop, shooting, hoping that I can get the right, the person or the subject at the right place. So it's that versatility that the twin lens has because of the compact body. I think it's that's why I will choose it. Anyway, that was that. That was
That's interesting, and it's interesting that the word you decide to choose to describe it is versatile. Because for me, I love the Rolleiflex, but I find that's where it suffers is the lack of versatility. Well, for me, because here's the thing, I did travel to San Francisco with my wife, and I had a Rolleiflex at the time, and I had the super wide Hasselblad. And the problem with the Rolleiflex is every 20 minutes, 12 shots in, I gotta say, oh, baby, wait, I gotta change film, And then, after, taking like what, maybe a minute or two to change film, another half hour, oh, baby, wait, I gotta change film. And I find that, the Hasselblad alleviates that problem because you have, interchangeable backs. So you can just pop, so I could have 3 backs loaded, and with different films. So I'm not stuck shooting just the one format because, as you guys know, I like shooting color transparency. If I see a shot in black and white, I'll do, oh, wait, dark slide in, pop it back off, black and white back on, shoot, and I get my shot. And then if I feel like, oh, the scene's colorful again, pop that off, pop the other one, and I can, run multiple films simultaneously, and also not worry about pissing her off while I'm, reloading the camera. Instead of every 20 minutes, I can do it on the fly with 3 backs set up. So for me personally, from the versatility aspect, for the sake of our discussion for travel photography, I'd probably go with the Hasselblad just because it saves a lot more time if you have multiple backs. Now, if we're talking where we're stuck with just one back, and in that case, then yeah, it's an either or. I can go with the Rolleiflex or the Hasselblad. But based on what's that?
All right, you finish.
Well, I was gonna say, based on the photography you guys do, I'm actually surprised you won't want the Rolleiflex. Because one other thing that we fail to remember or realize is that you have a parallax issue with the Rolleiflex because you're not looking through the taking lens, you're looking through the viewing lens. So given the fact that you guys like doing portraits, especially close-up portraits, people, or intimate portraits, sometimes framing is a lot harder because you're not looking through the lens like you are the Hasselblad. So that is kind of interesting that you guys didn't think about that.
Through the lens.
So you know how the Rolleiflex has 2 lenses, or any twin lens reflex has 2 lenses. The top lens is for you to look through. The bottom lens is the taking lens. So if you're up close, you have to kind of tilt it up a little bit, down a little bit to make sure you get the frame without cutting people's head off. So it is interesting you chose that, despite you guys being, portrait photographers. I guess you prefer, the intimacy and the quietness of that particular leaf shutter than, the mirror slap and the Hasselblad, which kind of helps you blend, in the background. So
when did I fall into the portrait category?
Well, specifically Lewis, but the way you're saying how you want to keep it next to you to take pictures of people. So, but this is more so for Lewis than, for you, I guess.
You're labeling Sebastian.
All right, I'll label you with the paintbrush next time, all right? You're more of a painter than, right?
Say, because I don't see it as portrait, I see it as moments, right? Photography.
No, that's fair. Yeah,
and that's all it is, and you get a chance to keep it
Mhm.
the way you want it anyway. So, where were we? I was gonna ask you how come you didn't choose Polaroid like and a camera, like how come it was like
Well,
this cameras and not? Well,
well, reason being is because they're the closest for comparison, and most Polaroid films nowadays are discontinued, so it's really hard to actually shoot a camera that doesn't have film. So that's why I did not choose a Polaroid. I mean, again, I guess you could say the Fuji Instax, but that is a little different, and they have their own cameras and different quirks also. But these two, I feel like they compare, to each other more so. Plus, based on the whole idea of traveling, we've all traveled. Yes, I know. We've all traveled with, one or both of these cameras. So I thought that would be interesting to bring up. So
apparently I owe Johnny two cameras, right? And I don't know where they are.
which two cameras? I know that my Instax 50 for sure, but the other one I don't know.
It was two of them,
No, just one.
pink one and a black one. No,
No, if you lost a pink one, you'd be in trouble. That's my wife. She still has a pink one. I think you have my black one somewhere.
you know what I think? I think Karen's got it. I'm just kidding. I just threw her under the bus, so hopefully she doesn't see the freaking.
Oh, she will. She's one of our subscribers. So, all right. That being said, so so safe to say that you guys really do like the Rolleiflex, with the lens that comes with. Is that correct?
For me, yes. I mean, I've always loved the Rolleiflex. Like I said, there's something about the Hasselblad. It's gorgeous. It's an incredible camera. Um, I'm gonna be loyal to my Rolleiflex. So
That's fair. And Sebastian, you too?
Twin lens. I'm not gonna say Rolly, but I'm gonna say the
That's fair.
twin
So
lens.
now this is where the question really comes in.
Rolly, obviously, yeah.
Given the fact of how much you guys hate the 50 mil, why do you like the Rolleiflex and why do you like the Hasselblad? Because at 80 millimeters, it is effectively 50 millimeters. So for your camera, Lewis, that you have, your 75 on that is a 48, which is very close to 50. And then, the other
Johnny,
cameras, at 80 is 50. So
you
why do you
you
like it so much despite it being a 50?
you can't get over the 50 millimeter, huh? It's
Well,
like
hey, I
it's
gotta ask. I told you, I
it's
gotta ask.
you're
Well,
finding workarounds.
well, no, there's a reason to why I'm asking this question. It's going to lead to another this or that. So,
Okay. Um, I will say this. I never actually thought about the Rolly being a 50 millimeter focal range equivalent, but I think the main difference is the aspect ratio, which is a square, and that makes a big difference versus shooting a 3:2 aspect ratio with a digital camera. So it's a good point. You're trying to. It's like that gotcha moment for you, but
I told you.
I
Well,
feel
this leads up to
like
another question.
I
So,
feel I feel like it's different because it is a square format, and we talked about shooting with a square format in the last episode where it's different. You're framing differently, so it's a different. It's kind of a different animal shooting with a square format over the normal 3:2 ratio. So I think for me that's the main thing. Shooting with a Rolly. I shoot with a Rolly because I do love that square format. I shoot it because it's also medium format. I shoot it because I love the look of the Rolly, the twin lens, looking through that ground glass and just looking down. It's just a beautiful camera, and I never actually thought about like being equivalent to a 50 millimeter lens.
good answer. I honestly, completely forgot about the whole, aspect ratio too. That wasn't even on my mind when I came up with this question. But that being said, what about you, Sebastian?
I think I don't even know what the question is because once you said 50 millimeter, you lost me.
Oh, you just got so angry at 50, huh?
Okay, I don't. Let's say that I don't hate because I don't hate, but
It
that
felt like there was quite a bit of disdain on the last episode, for 50 from both of you guys, so for the first episode, whatever it was, yeah.
probably said it, but uh, I'm just gonna say that. First of all, I remember the question, and then second of all, you know what? You first of all, you're looking through a different lens. So you know what? There are two lenses there. So you have two lenses there. My argument is
All right, that's fair. So that leads to my next this or that. The question is, in the scenario where we're shooting a square format, specifically, say the Rolleiflex or even a Hasselblad, would you rather shoot with the waist level or would you rather shoot with the prism? Because as you know, they can both use prisms and or waist level. It seems like you guys like the Rolleiflex is more because of the waist level aspect. So does that give you, a differing opinion of why you prefer the 50 mil equivalent now, despite the ratio, also the way you view the image, I presume?
When you say when you say prism, you're talking about putting the camera to your face,
Yes, versus a waist level.
and you're talking about Hasselblad versus Rolly, or you're just talking about
Well, in general, because you can shoot with the prism for both the Rolleiflexes or certain models and also the Hasselblad. So does
we're
the ability
talking
to allow you to
we're
shoot with
talking
the
medium format film cameras. We're not talking
yes,
digital.
not digital, yeah. So my question is, do you prefer shooting with a waist level or a prism when it comes to shooting medium format or with your
Wait,
Rolleiflex?
I'm gonna say waist level. I mean, it's I think it's part of the experience of shooting with a medium format. At least those two cameras. I'm just bringing those two cameras to mind. Um, yeah, that's part of like shooting with a Rolly is that you get to shoot waist level, and you know, we're getting older. At least me and Sebastian are getting a little bit older, so
I'm pretty
our
much there too
eyesight,
with you.
we may need to like bring it a little closer than waist level, maybe chest level, but it's still the way to photograph with that camera, I think. And that's the reason why I would choose it, because that's part of the experience of shooting with a Rolleiflex is being able to shoot waist level.
But you're right. You can do the same thing with the Hasselblad. You can do waist level with the Hasselblad.
Yeah.
I mean, it's man, but yeah, yeah, no,
So that being said, this isn't so much a this or that question, but do you think you would have a different opinion of the 50 mil in 35 millimeter format if you're shooting with waist level over shooting with standard prism?
You're just trying to like get us to.
Well, no. It's not a gotcha moment. It's a legit question because it seems like, the experience
of
from a waist level
course.
is a lot more enjoyable because it's not something that you're doing all the time. So the question is, would changing how you view that image, perhaps change your opinion of that particular focal length that you don't like?
That we do something with a 50 mm lens this coming event, so we can use it and present some images only on 50 mm after. But we can pick one camera, and that day we use the same camera. We decide, we take pictures of with a 50 mm lens. We choose our subjects, whether it's portrait, whatever you want to do. You want to shoot the top of a building. But what makes you shoot with that what is it with a freaking 50 mm lens? You know what? That's it. It's the last time we talk about a 50 mm lens.
Well,
Don't worry,
it's
this is the end of the conversation 50s. So
that's perfect, because that leads us to the point that we were talking about in the beginning of the episode, was that Johnny and I had a conversation about giving each other projects,
Oh,
and kind of selecting something that we're not comfortable shooting normally.
50 mils
So
for you guys?
I was telling Johnny I'm not a fan of shooting with my Rolly in the streets, because I think it's not it's not it's the camera's too big, and like people are going to notice you shooting with, and it attracts people. And the way I shoot street photography, I don't want people noticing me taking the shot. So it kind of like, we can kind of give ourselves projects where we don't feel comfortable, but that's kind of part of the project, and that's
Learning
kind of
aspect, yeah.
the learning aspect as well. So what do you guys
Well,
think?
before we jump in, well, that's a good idea. But before we jump into those projects, I do have a couple more questions for you guys. Literally just a couple, just two. So don't worry, we're almost done.
Okay.
Um, Back to this or that. Do you think you're a better photographer with more gear or with less gear?
Hmm.
Based on the conversation we had earlier about traveling, with the kitchen sink or just one camera, one lens. What do you
That
think?
is that's a very hard question for me, because like I said, I kind of like, for me, like I've kind of like build my own style of like taking specific gear, taking specific lenses, and a flash with a softbox and a stand. Um, if you're asking me, you know, shoot with one lens and one camera, and that's pretty much it, versus everything else that I would normally take.
Yeah, are you a better photographer with just one camera, one lens, or are you a better photographer with a bag full of gear?
Uh, I'm a better.
That's okay. You know,
I want to answer that right away, right now. Because I want to say just one lens, one camera. That's it.
Yeah, would that make you a better photographer than somebody with too much gear?
Because it'll take away a lot of the thinking and distractions in my head. So if I can get that rid of, like that, the choosing, or not only the choosing, but just having or knowing that I have something else to work on, within the process, it'll give me more chances and more opportunities to get distracted, to try to get something else, because ideas keep coming. Our brain keeps going. So that's why I would say just that, so I can just focus on the creation of the image more than the gear that it's on. So that's what I would choose. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, sure. So you would say for you, it's a less gear makes a better photographer.
It makes me a better photographer just because
That's fair. That's fair. I mean,
I
if
will
I can.
say, I will say the same.
I actually don't. I think it's the opposite between the you and I, because no, just because you have the knowledge and the experience of using the gear. So I believe that having more gear, you'll be able to switch right away within your experience on what you want to do. I mean, granted, yes, obviously it's going to help if I have more gear if I'm doing an art project or stuff like that. But I'm saying that's what I will choose just because it'll give me peace of mind. Maybe I was thinking that it'll give you peace of mind to know that you will have. I'm sorry that I'm just thinking for yourself, but I will, because I don't want you to like pull back and be like, oh, I need gear to be a better photographer. But you know, sometimes it's about what you feel. That's what I think. So I don't know. Anyway, but
Oh,
go.
I think having having less gear actually makes you a better photographer because you're working with what you have. And it's like anything else in life. Like you work with what you have. If you don't have a car and you have to get to work and you have a bicycle, that's the best form of transportation for you because that's what you have, right? And I feel like it's the same way with photography. If you give me a camera and a single lens, I'm going to make the best of it and I'm going to shoot to the best of my ability with whatever I have. And I feel like in a way it also makes you a better photographer because you're not overthinking it. You're kind of what you have and you're going to work with that particular set of tools. And you know
True, absolutely 100%. Because let's say you're going to a photo shoot, you're going to a wedding, and have your gear, breaks or get destroyed on the way, and now you're gonna have to deal with it. You're gonna have to do with what you have if you don't have any other opportunity to bring it on. And I mean, I granted, you don't want that to happen to you, but in any case, if you're left with everything without anything except freaking a 35 millimeter and a 50 millimeter lens, like Johnny would like to, you know, um, fantasize on the 50 millimeter lens, then we'll have to do it. It'll have to be. Um, but again, at the end of the day, it's your vision. You'll have to switch your vision, your idea, your goal at that moment, and just quickly, figure things out. That's what I'm thinking.
yeah, I guess you're right. I guess that wasn't fair. That was a bit of a loaded question. I mean, there really isn't a right or a wrong, and I guess you could be a good photographer regardless if you have a lot of gear or less gear. But for me personally, I find, as you guys know, I'm a bit of a gearhead, so I have more stuff than I should. I feel like that has become a bit distracting now. Like you have said, Sebastian, it does allow me to, I guess, be a bit more creative because I can visualize certain things with certain focal lengths that most normal people wouldn't have. But by being distracted by having so many focal lengths in my mind and in my vision, you could say, or mind's eye, I kind of, forego some of the things that, I should see right in front of me. So that's why, I propose this question, is more for myself than for you guys. Because as you know, I have a lot of stuff, but at the same time, in the past 5 years or so, I've been trying to just use only one or two pieces of gear to try to, as you said, hopefully engage my creativity a bit more because I limit myself and I'm forced to see with only what that one lens can see. So I guess that's a bit of a loaded question for all of us. But for me, I would have to say having less gear now probably, well, using less gear, I wouldn't say having less gear, probably makes me a slightly better photographer because I'm forced to, like you said, work with what I have and actually become creative with what I have versus, just creating things with, all the other tools that I have. So I would probably say for me, having less gear would actually help me at this point in time or, using less gear. So one question I have is, given the fact we all have experience with these particular films, which direction would you rather go in? Would you rather go for classic emulsions such as HP5 and Tri-X, where you have traditional grain, where they're nice and smooth and I guess organic? Or would you go with a more modern emulsions such as T-Max and the Ilford Deltas, and why?
Are you talking about the same ISO
Yeah.
film?
So 100, HP5 is 400, so HP5 and Tri-X versus T-Max 400, Delta 400, or their equivalents, say, well, nothing really in Kodak, but say, FP4 versus T-Max 100, Delta 100.
Was fantastic for like studio shots. But I wouldn't go with like a Delta for I will go HP 400. I think HP gives you a really nice feeling. I think it's got a better texture. I believe. I don't know. I don't know what you think, Luis.
I shot more Tri-X than anything else. But the times that I shot with HP5, I feel like it has a little bit less grain. Maybe it's just me, but I always kind of felt like it was a little bit smoother.
I thought that was a Delta one. No?
Ilford HP5 we're talking about, right?
Yeah. Versus Delta
Yeah.
or T-Max.
Versus I mean, I would go Ilford HP5. I mean, I would go with those. If you're putting Ilford HP5 and 400 Tri-X together, I'd rather shoot with those
Gotcha.
than the other. Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
What do you think, Johnny?
I don't know.
I don't know. For me personally, I do enjoy both emulsions quite a bit. But for the sake of printing, if you're actually doing darkroom printing, I guess depending on the mood that you're actually hoping the image would achieve, I personally prefer the slightly cleaner look. So I would probably go with even Delta 100. I mean, I know, if I really want that look, I can shoot digital to get the clinically clean look. But this would probably be as close I can get to clinically clean without actually shooting digital and printing a nice sharp image because the T-Max and Deltas do tend to be a bit sharper because of how the emulsions actually made and come together. So I would probably say I'd prefer that if I'm printing. But again, it depends on the mood, I guess. But ultimately, I think I prefer the slightly sharper film.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So with that being said, that concludes this or that for this particular episode. Hopefully you guys actually enjoyed the selection that I have chosen for you, and hopefully got your brain to start clicking and thinking. So thanks again for watching another episode of Just Shoot and Learn. I'm your host Johnny with Sebastian and Lewis, and again, this particular episode will be a little bit interesting because by the time this goes out, Lewis would already have been here, and we may have another perhaps live session of the photo shoot this coming July 4th or this Friday. So
just keep watching, keep joining. Hopefully to see you around, and hopefully you're enjoying the content that we're creating. It's I think we're three great friends that are trying to bring and motivate new people, newcomers, and the people that are already interested in photography. Hopefully they can gather some great tips or inspiration. It'll be great.
Nice.
See you guys next time.
All right.
See you 14 people next time.
Bye-bye, guys.
Oh, 100. Can I finish my ice cream?
Yeah. We'll end it right there.